Tonight's speaker is Michael Goldstein. Michael moved to the Catskill area from Trenton a couple of years ago and found us, so he's a relatively new member. He spent most of his career in software and tech businesses, including a couple of stints as a management consultant. He switched to historic real estate development as a midlife career change. Currently stays not quite retired by consulting with nonprofits on adaptive reuse of historic buildings. Got to talk to you about an old rock building that's near me. He's currently working with a new nonprofit, 120 State Street, to adaptively redevelop the First Presbyterian Church of Trenton, New Jersey. Outside of astronomy, Michael is an avid small stream fly fisherman and hiker. He loves exploring the Catskills for isolated headwater streams, supporting wild native brook trout. And he also does a little thing called electronically augmented astronomy, which I cannot get out of my head as Experimental Aircraft Association, but there you go.
It's the worst name ever.
It's just what you got first, that's all. So Michael will present to us on how you do EAA, what it is, and he's got a lot of equipment up here, so I'll hand it over to Michael and see you afterwards. By the way, one thing I didn't mention before, real quick, is after the meeting, a number of us, if you'd like, go out to Pete's place just up the street, Pasquale's, for a little continuation of discussion. Anyone who care to join us, I'll find a number afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Greetings. So for people on Zoom, there are, I don't know, 25 people here or something. A nice turnout. Thank you. Can I see a show of hands? How many people are astrophotographers here? Okay, only a couple. How many people do visual astronomy through telescopes? Almost everybody. Okay, great. So we're going to talk about what is a horrible name, EAA. I like to call it real-time astro imaging, which actually is at least a little meaningful. But it's something that when I moved to the Catskills, I decided I wanted to do and bought a telescope and started doing it. I took delivery in September of 22. Took me about 3 months to actually do EAA, and I've been doing it ever since. So I think where we should start is what's the difference between EAA and conventional astrophotography. So in astrophotography, what I'm calling here AP, you capture hours of data and you process it later. Should I admit? Okay. Okay. In EAA, you capture minutes of data and you display it in real time. So, you know, it is a form of observation. Okay. And the point in astrophotography is to always create a photograph. Now, when you do EAA, you image, but the point of the image is to do a better job of observing. And if you want to save the image at the end, that's great, and I always do, but you don't have to. It's perfectly fine to use the technology to see what you want to see and not save anything. We're always fighting, and this, by the way, these are the only 3 images I didn't take in this entire presentation. They came from a friend in cloudy nights. And, you know, one of the reasons I think people are resistant to EAA is they think, oh God, astrophotography takes forever. Guess is how long were these imaged? You can see I've got 3 galaxies. They're fairly bright galaxies, but they're not the brightest. Anyone want to take a guess? I mean, so let me ask a question. Guys who use telescopes, when you look through your telescope at M81, do you see as much as that, or do you see as much detail as M51 when you look through your telescope? I would suggest almost nobody. So the point is that each of these images was captured in 60 seconds and not by a particularly fancy rig, by the way. So you really can do real-time observation and not have to sit around for a long time. This is one of my 60-second images. Do you guys look at the Rosette Nebula? That's got that one in 60 seconds. Here's the North American Nebula with the Pelican Nebula. Again, a lot of noise, right? It's not gonna, you're not gonna win a contest. You're not gonna be the astrophotograph of the month, but you see a tremendous amount quickly. Now, if you spend a little more time, we saw M101 with the graduate students. This is a 35-minute capture that I did of M101. I was excited to see the supernova, and in fact, you can see it on the arm there. And you can see quite a lot. Okay, so who does EAA and why? And I'd submit that it's two groups of people. One, it's former visual astronomers who, for various reasons, are deciding to go in this direction, and we'll talk about why in just a second. Or it's tech-savvy newbies, and I fell into that category. I had not done astronomy before I started to do this. Why do you do it? Number one, you just see more. Secondly, we live in a world, unfortunately, where there's worsening light pollution. You can see really faint DSOs using this technology, even in Bortle 7+ skies. I mean, I happen to live in kind of mid Bortle 4, 3.5, 3.75, something like that. And it makes things a lot easier. But you can do this in almost any sky. A lot of people who do EAA are getting older. They used to have fabulous averted vision. Now it doesn't work so well anymore. The technology is also getting better and it's getting easier. Witness that little device there, which we'll talk about in a second. So it's, some of the barriers to doing this are going away. And finally, which is a big deal in this part of the world, you can observe in comfort, even in the middle of winter. So there's my first telescope. I now have an Edge HD, which is a long story why I don't have this one. You can see it just went through an imaging session in the frost. I have gotten my EAA down to the point where I need about 5 minutes. I now use an AM5 mount and an Edge HD for my big telescope and a bunch of wide field stuff. So I use a gem mount now. So I have to polar align. Basically, just because the stupid designers didn't put any computer controlled motors to let you do polar alignment, the first guy that does is I'm gonna get a new mount. I can basically be outside for 5 minutes, polar align my scope, and I can do absolutely everything else inside. So my exposure is to the cold elements, and everything else is running over Wi-Fi in my house, and I have a great time. So to give you an idea of what it's like, what I did was I had a wonderful night on November 16th. My goal was, I was very excited. I'd never seen the Horsehead Nebula. I wanted to image it. It was dusk at 6:10, astronomical dusk at 6:10. The Horsehead was going to get to 40 degrees at a little after midnight. So I figured I had 6 hours, and I planned a set of observations using my ASC-RV, which is a 270 millimeter f4.5 refractor. And I figured I had plenty of time. So I spent a little more time on these captures than I normally do. And the first one was the Heart and Soul Nebula. I spent 40 minutes on that. Second was the Veil Nebula. That was 36 minutes. Looking at this now, I realize I had the black set a little too dark, but still, I mean, I had a great time seeing that. I'd never seen the whole thing in one. I got to do a little eye candy with Andromeda, 30 minutes. Now, I was only using a 270 millimeter refractor, so M33 is a lot smaller, but still pretty. This was the first time I'd ever imaged the Pleiades with the telescope, and I was blown away. This is now, I think, my favorite kind of bright Messier object, because it's what I discovered. I did the Pleiades in a bunch of different focal lengths at different times and just enjoyed it each time. And the longer you stay on it, the better it gets. But this is, so that's why I stayed on it for an hour, almost just under an hour. Anyway, I didn't have anything to do till I got to the horse head. Okay, and then I got to the horse head again with 270, and it was gorgeous. Now here I'm using a L-enhanced filter, which really makes all that hydrogen alpha pop. But had that, and then it was like 1 o'clock, but I didn't want to go to bed, so I said, okay, I am next to M42, so let's take a look at M42. And I spent half an hour on that. And then it was time to go to bed, way past my bedtime. But I had, okay, so the point is that you're not spending hours and hours and hours and hours capturing data. You are thoroughly entertained the whole time, because you start seeing stuff after a minute or two, and then it just gets better and better, and you can stay on it as long as you want, or if you don't like it or you're bored, you move on. It's live, real-time observing. Okay, if we look at everything here, this was all done in one night. Now, a long night, 7.5 hours, but still all done from my backyard. So one of the things I get asked is, how good is this technology really? And I've gotten some insight into that recently. Do people know who Chip Arp is, Halton Arp, or the Alton? Yeah, great. Oh, cool. So Alton is one of the real characters of astronomy. He was a contrarian, a very serious guy. He was one of the lead observers on Mount Palomar for many years. He then got booted out, I think, and exiled to Germany, because he didn't accept the idea of the Big Bang, or that redshift was redshift. He wrote a book debunking redshift as a measure of distance, which wasn't going to get anybody at Caltech or Mount Palomar on his side. But he wrote this, so he was, there was the Hubble Atlas of Galaxies, and he was one of the lead imagers for that. Well, in '66, he published a book called The Atlas of Peculiar Galaxies. And if you know this, it's just the most fun observing list you can imagine. And there's Astronomical League will actually give you a merit badge if you image 100 of them. And I've started doing this. I'm at 34. Okay, so on the one side, we have ARP imaging with the 200-inch F3 Hale telescope, which in current dollars cost them about $100 million to build. But they were using photographic plates. On the right, we have what I image with, which is a Celestron Edge HD. It's 8 inches, it's about $3,000, including the mount. So I think it's 30,000 of them could be bought for what they spent on the Hale telescope. But I get a CMOS camera, I get live stacking via SharpCap, and if I need it, I can throw what I get out into Photoshop, or I actually use Affinity Photo, but it's equivalent of SharpCap to see what I can see. Now, here is ARP1. This is a magnitude 12.7 galaxy, which means it's 3,400 times dimmer than Andromeda. On the left is a negative plate that came straight out of ARP's galaxy. On the right is what I did, somewhat enhanced in Affinity Photo in 53 minutes. Now, 200 inches gives you way more resolution than I get at 8 inches. But in terms of actual imaging power, I can do pretty well. And I mean, and it's decent compared to the 200-inch Hale telescope. Another one, this one I'm really proud of. That, you know, HARP does all these things. This is our two galaxies that interact. On the left, you've got his image, the little galaxy on top with kind of dust lane connecting it to the lower thing. That's magnitude 14. Okay, that's 16,525 times less light than you get out of Andromeda. On the right is what I did with 60 minutes integration on my Edge HD with a little help from Photoshop. So, you know, if you ask me, how good is the technology? Really, I would say it's really good. You know, you can do amazing things in short amounts of time. Okay, so that's my introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about equipment, software, and an option you have to either go with your sort of upgrading your conventional telescope and adding this to that, or going to a fully automated telescope. That's a $500 thing. Celestron just announced a $4,000 thing. We'll talk a little bit about that. Then I want to show you what an EAA session is like, kind of make it a little more real, and then we'll open things up to questions. By the way, if I'm confusing anyone, or if you feel free to raise your hand and ask a question. Okay, equipment. So what EAA until about 2 years ago always were computerized telescopes. So you needed a telescope with a go-to mount. It doesn't matter, it can be an alt-az mount or it can be an equatorial mount. You need some sort of control computer. You could start, if you have a Windows laptop, you could start there. Most people, when they get serious, mount the control computers on their telescopes for a bunch of reasons. There is a pretty substantial learning curve. It took me, once I could like get my telescope working, then when I added the camera, it took me, knowing nothing, but I'm a pretty quick learner, it took me about 2 months to actually start getting successful stuff. A good quality system all in can start about $1,500, and the sky's the limit at the other end. There are really two main software options for computerized telescopes. One is SharpCap, which is what I use. It's the quality leader. It's very powerful. It has a substantial learning curve, but I believe it's worth it. They've just added planetary live stacking, so you can actually take phenomenal images of Saturn and Jupiter and so forth, and kind of do the same thing where they could just get better and better the longer you stay on it. The ASI Air is the alternative. A lot of the astrophotographers use it as a controller. It's, in my opinion, a mediocre EAA platform, but it has a shorter learning curve. So a lot of people like it for that reason. If you are a narrowband imager and would like to do EAA, you can actually do that. There's a niche product called Jocular that allows you to essentially take images with your different filters and blend them in real time. So just throw that out to your AP guys who say, I just love doing narrowband stuff. Don't want to give that up. Well, you don't have to. You can do EAA and still do it. Okay, and then as an alternative, you have automated telescopes. This C-Star, as I said, is $499. Right, this generation is kind of a mediocre EAA platform. It's actually a pretty good AP capture program. But if the conditions are good, it can do a really good job. The problem is it doesn't handle bad conditions very well. So if you post-process and and capture all your raw images and filter them out after the fact, you can get actually pretty good images. But if you want to see it in real time, that's a problem. So here is the LEO triplet. On the left is the ARP plate for it. On the right is the best image I've taken of a deep space object with the C-Star. It happened to be, I woke up at 4 in the morning and I couldn't sleep, so I threw the C-Star up, and it was just one of those perfect December crisp, clear nights. And I got an hour of capture on it, or 30 minutes capture. And it really did a nice job. Now, I don't know if you can see the difference between my ASCAR and the C-Star on a kind of more comparable thing. The C-Star is okay. It doesn't quite have the brilliance and the definition of the other one. This is a target size that's well suited to the C-Star. One of the problems you run into is there are a lot of targets you think with the 50 millimeter refractor, which is essentially what that is. A lot of targets you think would be pretty good, but in fact, because it's such an inexpensive, tiny sensor, it only captures a small part of what you would expect as the full field of view. So, you see, you only get a little tiny fraction of the Rosette Nebula in the C-Star, whereas in my ASCAR, I can get the whole thing. So if you're thinking about EAA and going this direction, there are really kind of 3 paths you can go. You can buy an automated telescope, and tomorrow, if it was a clear night and you had it in your hands, you would probably get an image out of it. I mean, it's not a zero learning curve, but it's a few hours. You can, if your current rig is a go-to rig, so you've got a tracking mount and you can control it with a computer or a hand controller, or a computer, you could upgrade that by buying a camera and connecting a Windows computer to it and using SharpCap. Or you could go a whole hog and spend a ton of money if you wanted to. Okay, so what's it like to observe using EAA? And that is actually this MacBook I'm using here, talking to my telescope using Windows Remote Desktop. So it does look like a Windows 11 screen, but in fact it's a Mac screen. But it is for all intents and purposes my control computer. Look, any good EAA evening starts with a lot of planning, because if you're, unlike AP where you might say, okay, I'm gonna get 1 target or 2. In this case, I was trying to get 6. So you need to plan. You need to figure out what are the targets that are available, what are appropriate to the focal length of my scope. You need to sequence them so you're not too close to transit, because you can't do a media flip in the beginning of these things, a median flip. So, for example, I observe between 270 and 2000 millimeters focal length, and it's a very different view of the world. So on a given night, I don't my rule is one focal length per night, and I build my plan against that focal length. Okay, so now what is it actually like doing it? So what I did was I had a capture I did with my C925 in February of 23. I was targeting the Whirlpool galaxy. I had all the raw images, so I recreated them and essentially ran them through SharpCap again so I could build this demo. So the way this starts is SharpCap has a target catalog. You can look things up. So on the tools menu, go to catalog, target, coordinates. You look up M51, it finds it. You then say start, and it'll set the tracking rate. It'll move there. It'll do all kinds of administration. It will then wait and plate solve, see if you're on it. If you're not quite on it, it'll then tell you that you're not quite on it, and it'll center your object. It'll then sync them out, recenter the target for you, and you're off to the races. So now what you want to do is set the camera controls. Now this stuff you can set manually, but most people set a profile. In this case, I was setting 10-second exposures at 350 gain. And why such high gain? Why such small exposures? Well, in my case, I had a 1500 millimeter telescope that was sitting on a not very stable deck. And anytime there was a breath of wind, it would vibrate, and it would look like shit. So I did 10-second exposures, and frankly, the read noise on a CMOS camera is low enough that that's not optimal, but it's not a problem. You don't need to guide either even if with a gem mount, because you're really only worried about drift during the exposure, and the drift generally in 30 seconds or less doesn't matter. And then SharpCap will recenter first of all, next time it aligns the next frame, it's right on top. So drift on the next exposure doesn't matter, and it will actually recenter for you. The latest SharpCap will say, okay, after a certain amount of time, we'll recenter. So, okay, so what's going to happen? When you start up, it goes through an imaging cycle. So the camera is set up to create an image, and it delivers it to that folder. And then what SharpCap does is filters it, because when you do AP, you filter the bad exposures after the fact. Well, if you want high quality, you need to filter it before the fact. You don't want to stack an exposure that's terrible. And it does two kinds of filtering. One is FWHM, full width, half maximum. And basically that's a measure of blurriness. Like if the wind blows and shakes your scope, FWHM will go high and it'll say, whoop, can't use that one, leave that aside. And the second thing is a brightness filter. If high clouds come in over, brightness will go down, and the high clouds are going to blur your stuff. So you don't want to do those either. So filtering, which in conventional astrophotography you do after the fact, with SharpCap or any EAA, you need to do in real time. Then you apply darks, flats, and any other calibration frames that you have. So again, often in AP, you're capturing those things at the end. Here, you got to capture them up front. So then once it's processed, it'll then take that exposure, align it with the previous stack, then it stacks it on top, and it then throws it out. So now we're out of the loop and we're into the controls. It throws it out to the computer screen where you, as the observer, can control what it looks like and stretch the image. So, okay. So this is what the SharpCap interface looks like. On the left is the live stack display. On the right are those camera and telescope controls. And on the bottom are the controls where you control the stack. Now, we at this point have one exposure in. We've got 10 seconds of data. And to control the stack on the far left, we can turn off the filtering or not. Also, we can save the image. In the middle is the histogram, which is where we're going to be spending most of our time, and I'll come back to that. And on the right are color controls, so you can control the color balance and the color intensity on the far right. Now, what is a histogram? You've probably seen them. I didn't understand them till I actually really understood them till I researched it for this thing. Essentially, it's simpler than it looks. What you see is you've got a blue, red, and green line, and that white line is the average of the three. And essentially what it is, it's just a simple plot, and it says it plots the number of pixels against brightness. So brightness is on the x-axis. The number of pixels is the y-axis. It's a count of those pixels. And what it's showing is, and as you go from left to right, you're going from black or low intensity, and the far right, it's high intensity. So what you see here is the first 10 seconds, the three different color curves coming out of the camera. Now, the most common color in most astronomical images is dark gray, right? Black to dark gray. So what does that mean? What is that peak? Well, that peak is where basically anything to the left of that peak is basically black. So you have three controls. You've got black level, which is where you want it to render a pixel as black. You've got a mid-level and a white level with three lines. Where should we set the black level? Anyone want to venture a guess? Where the black kind of ends, which is kind of that peak. So you want to move that to the peak, and oops, 10 seconds. But now when we move it, we can see M51. Okay, so where the mid-level should go, somewhere in the middle, right? But not the middle of the screen, the middle of where the data is. So we move that to the mid-level, and oh my goodness, 10 seconds of data, but we move it to the middle of it, and now we can really see it. Now, it turns out that those little bumps on the far right, those are basically stars, the brightness you're seeing of stars and the colors of stars. And that has the least impact, but it helps a little. Okay, so we've got 10 seconds and we can already see M51. Now, I've clicked on the FWHM tab to see what level, and green means it's accepted the frame. It met my filtering criteria. And as we start adding exposures, again, it's accepting them because they're all acceptable levels. I'm not getting a lot of shake. Now, let me go back and forth a little bit. You see, even in 30 seconds, the image has improved significantly. And now I'm a minute and a half into it. And that colored background, we're already seeing a reduction in noise. We're already seeing it trending a little bit more to black from the blue. Now, we're 5 minutes into it. Color balance isn't great, but we're really now starting to see some detail. Color balance you can fix right up to the end. I've set a little bit of filtering. I set really tight filtering, and the tighter you set the filtering, the higher the quality will be. Now, in this case, I wouldn't set it this tight. I mean, 7.2 maybe, but I wanted to show you some red bars. And frankly, I only kept the ones I originally kept. So I had to set it really tight. But anyway, the one thing is we have not lost any due to brightness. This was a superbly clear night, so that kept going. So now we're at 10 minutes. We've, essentially, there's kind of a power of two thing going on here. 20 seconds is noticeably better than 10 seconds. 40 seconds is noticeably better than 20. And you pretty much have to double time to really see a difference. So here we're at 10 minutes and it's already pretty good. You can see I'm losing the bottom edge because this is an alt-as matte and it's rotating, but we'll fix that when we crop it at the end. We've got still got kind of a bluish cast. So one way to get rid of the bluish cast is to move the black point to the right. And now it's blue, it's black, not blue. But if I go back, I also lost a lot of the faint detail. So that's actually not the right way to do it. One of the funny things is when I redid this, I'm much better at controlling this than I used to be. And so the image I got out was better than the one I got originally. So completely the same data, same software, just a little better operated. But so in this case, I should have peaked the color detail. And now we're at 36 minutes and 10 seconds. This is the final histogram. I used Sharp Cap to color balance, and then I got the black level exactly where I wanted it. So now I've got both the dark black background and the faint detail. And there's the final image that we got cropped. Okay, so if folks are interested, I am going to arrange a hands-on workshop at my house. Anyone who would like to come, we'll arrange it, and we can do this not in a pseudo way, but in a real way. So buttonhole me or go on Slack and message me. And with that, I'm done and open to questions. Oh, bunch of questions. Okay, so I think the gentleman with the beard was the first hand I saw anyway, and then a woman in the back row, and then the person here. And we'll take all the questions you got.
Hi, thanks for that. That was great. Can you talked about doing post-processing in Photoshop or Affinity. Could you talk about what you do with that and where it's relevant versus what you're getting in real time?
Okay. Sure. First of all, you can capture all of your raw images if you want and do completely conventional astrophotography processing if you wish. You can save the stack, which means you can't get rid, and the advantage of saving the raw images, if, for example, there was a satellite that came through, you've got satellite removal, but it doesn't work perfectly in SharpCap. Whereas if you saved all the raw images, you can see the frame where the satellite came through and just pull it out and do it. Now, I tend not to do that. What I will do is 2 or 3 things. One is I will use a healing brush to get rid of a satellite track that SharpCap will remove given enough time, and if it's not too bad, but it doesn't always work. I sometimes have errors. I make mistakes, and I will just take the PNG and I will do a levels on it, or I will, sometimes I don't like the background. There's Affinity actually has a whole set of macros, and you can increase the contrast. You can stretch it even more than you originally stretch it. So there's really a lot you can do. I don't do much of it on kind of these wide field images. I find myself doing a lot more with the ARP stuff, like to bring out that dust lane connecting the those 2 galaxies. I showed the 14th magnitude galaxy. That was, I could barely see it when I captured in a SharpCap, but by doing some additional processing in Affinity, I was able to really make that pop. Does that? Woman in back had her hand up.
When are you can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. When are you thinking about doing that workshop at your place?
It's up to you guys. I love doing it, and I don't need a big crowd, but I think, I don't want to do 12 of them at the same time, but I'm happy to. I would love to have people come. I've got a great sky and a pier that is anchored in bedrock, 12-inch concrete column. So I didn't think I could do this, but in fact, if I use a wide field refractor, I can image up to 25 miles an hour wind, which is kind of fun.
Okay, well, I'd love to come. So I'd love to figure out how to do the details about that. But I have an actual question. So I did the thing that you referred to as going whole hog, I believe. So I bought all the things, and I have the Acier. Is that Acier? I'm not sure how you even pronounced it. How does the SharpCap compare? Because I've only tried with the Acier. How do you do the polar alignment with the SharpCap in contrast?
Well, so SharpCap has a polar alignment routine, but it's also just a Windows app. And I actually like Nina's polar alignment, so I use Nina.
Okay.
Okay. A lot of people love SharpCap. The big advantage of Nina is SharpCap requires you to point north and essentially see the North Star, whereas Nina lets you point anywhere in the sky, which is very helpful in our part of the world. So, but they're conceptually they're similar, though. I would say the biggest difference between SharpCap and ASI Air in terms of EAA live stacking is SharpCap demands that you interact with it, whereas ASI Air kind of doesn't really give you that many options to interact with it. I mean, there is kind of a histogram control, but it's not nearly as flexible or
That's
powerful.
really hard to use.
The other big difference is ASI Air does not do either FWHM or brightness filtering, whereas SharpCap does. So if conditions are perfect, ASI Air will give you a really great image. If they're kind of in and out, like is often in the Mid-Hudson Valley, SharpCap will deliver much high. If you know what you're doing, use the filtering properly, adjust the histogram properly, you will get much higher quality with SharpCap.
So you are inside interacting with everything on your screen pretty much the whole time you're imaging.
I mean, You go in, it depends. If you're doing a 10-minute imaging and you're not worried about driving the noise down. Now, truth be told, I like my pretty pictures that I send to my friends. So I'll, from a real-time observing point of view, I've got maybe 80 or 90% of it after 10 or 15 minutes. Pretty much, I can then let it run. I'll go up, I'll make some soup, I'll get a cup of coffee, I'll come back, grab another 10 or 15 minutes, do some final tweaking, and then save it and move on. But during those first 10 minutes, it's very active. You're very engaged. And for me, that I love that. That's one of the C-Star over there drives me nuts because there's nothing to do. So anyway, you're welcome. Other questions, gentlemen? No? Any other questions?
There we go. Thank you. Okay, are there other rigs like the Star Sense out there?
The C-Star.
C-Star.
Okay.
Sorry.
So there's a couple of precursors that are at this point sort of obsolete. There's the Dwarf, which is kind of a wider field of view, but kind of similar or even smaller. And then Celestron just announced a $4,000 fully automated rig, which is essentially a C6 with a RASA. So it's like an F2. It's like a 400 millimeter focal length F2 scope. Has not come out yet, but it's been announced, and I think people are pre-ordering it. But that's $4,000.
And on a totally different topic, for star parties,
Yes.
I would love to see a handful of EA astronomers there. How would that work? Or can you do it with just one? I was at the last star party and the one before that, and I was so busy working with newcomers, I never got over to see your rig. So
Right.
how did that work out?
Well, I'm still learning. One of my learning curves, first time I brought the C-Star, I didn't have this day glow tape on. I couldn't find the thing in the dark. So, you go through a learning curve, and I've only been at a few star parties, but,
Yeah.
I think you get a better experience and certainly better images with the full rig. And I've brought that at times. It's a fair amount of work, but I would love to have company. I think we could have a kind of an EAA corner, and really show some people some amazing stuff. A couple of different focal lengths would be wonderful. You got a wide field doing big nebula. You got an Edge 8 doing galaxies, and people seeing them. I think people would love it.
So for now, it's just you. I
For
would like
now,
to
it's
see
just
more.
me, but I hope someone else will start joining me.
But if you are there and you have a group of 8-10 people that are watching what you have because you can really see stuff, how many different objects could you show them?
Well, you see
half
what you
hour.
can, depends on the objects, it depends on the night. I mean, it's for galaxies, which are, the minute galaxies some of them are okay. But the answer is what I think is most fun for people is when they see an image that's developed, it's got 10 minutes on it and it's clear. And then you say, okay, we're going to change images.
Okay.
And you scan to a new thing and you start anew, and then they see it kind of start up.
Okay, that's
And it
exactly what I was hoping for.
Doesn't
Yeah.
take that long,
Yeah.
as you saw. I mean, if if you know what you're doing and you pick the right place to go, and it goes, flawlessly to the next image. It's not like you
And
got to hunt
I
around.
see that as being a
It
lot,
plate solves and it's centered and then you go.
I see that as being a lot of fun for you and for the participants. Well, a
Wh-
lot of people who show up have never even looked through a regular telescope.
Yeah, well, it's way easier than looking at
Yeah,
through a regular telescope, and people are spoiled. They look through a telescope, they think they're going to see Hubble, and they don't. Here, they almost see Hubble,
Yeah,
so
that's quite cool. I'm very excited about this whole thing. So we've been hoping for this for a while.
good. Well, I love doing it now. I'm going down my own learning curve, and doing it with an audience is way harder than doing it in your backyard, because you get people, unfortunately, I get into a point where I'm having to tell people I'm problem solving. Can you come back in 10 minutes?
Okay.
Because if I rent, I'm running into glitches, then I gotta deal with it. At home, I've worked everything out. I never have glitches.
Yeah.
Right. Or almost never. So.
I'm gonna give a quick show and tell on the sea star here.
Oh, okay. So the Sea Star is a device. It's battery powered. You turn it on. It didn't hold it long enough. That's okay. Got to wait for the power light to come on. It talks to your phone. I'm waiting for it to tell me it's ready to connect. Powering on, ready to connect. Did everyone hear that? Okay, so now, if let's pretend we're going to do some stargazing. Oh, well, the first thing you have to do is actually connect. It has connected now. It's got its own Wi-Fi server built in. And now so it gives me, I don't know if you can see this, but it gives me a bunch of targets. It says tonight's best include M42, the Orion Nebula. Can you see that? So let's pretend we're going after Orion. Currently telling me it's in the southwest at 35 degrees altitude. And it's got a gazing button, and I'm going to hit gazing. Finding object. Now, if it were a clear night and we were outside, it would find it most times. But it's gonna kind of go up, try and find the sky. It'll take a photograph. It'll plate solve and say, oh, okay, I got to go over there. It also automatically decides whether it's level or not. I mean, basically, it would get to where it needs to be if we were outside, but of course we're not. It's actually trying to plate solve now. So. Yeah, well, it comes with a solar filter and well, okay, it has a UV-IR cut filter built in, and it has a light pollution filter built in. And it comes with an external solar filter, so you can take pictures of the sun. So that's the Sea Star. I got that. I ordered it before they shipped it, so I got it for $3.99. But they're $4.99 now.
If power had to die, battery dies, does it lose what it took, or is that stored?
Well, you can. It stores it anytime you push a button to tell it to soar. But look, I ran this for a couple of hours at the Star Party last week, and I left with 75% battery. I mean, the battery runs pretty good. And it's just a USB-C, so you can take any kind of power pack and plug it into USB-C and complement it, or you can plug it into a charger. I mean, I'm kind of like Jack. I've got a Ionic 5, and I've got the thing you plug into the back, so I've got a inverter and plenty of AC power. So when I run this at the Star Party, I just keep it plugged in.
So the image goes to your phone or to
The
a
image
tablet?
goes to your phone. I mean, I can show, I've got lots of, I mean, at the last Star Party, kind of Orion was in the clearest part of the sky. So I was imaging stuff, you know, M42 and the Horsehead and so forth. And it
So
was,
Can
it
people
was
who, with their own phones, link into the network?
not, no.
Nah.
But it's like an edit control, so you probably wouldn't want to do it because they could.
Yeah, no, well, I didn't permit that, but you know, it ends up in your Photos app, and you just, I mean, it's nicely integrated. Then you could airdrop them to other people if they wanted them.
Oh, okay. Okay.
If you're doing taking solar image with the solar filter, how long does it get a good image? The sun, like, obviously, deep sky objects, you need a fair amount of
Oh,
time.
well,
to gather light.
yeah, you're not stacking the sun. It's
Oh, okay.
okay. It's either taking single images or time-lapse video, but each image is
There's
its own
no,
thing.
No stacking after.
No stacking that I'm aware of. Yeah.
No, so just one last one, and then I'll stop. So at that Star Party, again, I couldn't get over there. You had that running, and did you also have another scope going at the same time?
No, I once tried doing two at once, and it's too hard. It's just too much. You're not. So this was my first solar image.
Okay.
Don't show the camera.
Oh, okay. So I did a solar image for the first time last week. Am I in?
Let's see, what just, are we using this camera?
No. There we will be.
There it is.
Okay, so do I go closer?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a solar image I took
Oh,
the
I
other
see.
day. Then if I go, trying to, okay, so this I did at the Star Party. This is the Flame Nebula.
Nice.
Okay, and then I did the Horsehead, which of course is right next to the flame. Okay, that was the other day. Did M42 at the Star Party. So
Nice.
other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Michael. That was absolutely outstanding. Very, very cool. All right. With that, we'll call our meeting to a close.